It's hose head here. No. Listen, I have this thing, okay? Growing up, when I did being a teenager in the 70s, I really was into Second City TV and Second City, the whole comedy genre that brought us things like Bob and Doug McKenzie. In fact, when I was that age, in 1979, kind of during the height of it, I was in downtown Toronto, walking around with my brother doing some shopping, and we were actually mistaken as Bob and Doug McKenzie. We had the big toques on, the boots, the toques. I'm not making this up. And we had listened to Q107 rock radio, because it was album-oriented rock radio. It was a really hot station at the time. And so the guys that were on the air would say, oh, you should drop by the station if you're in town, blah, 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 blah. And I had just bought a copy of their album, their Christmas album. But anyway, we went into the building, high-rise building, and we went up, got off at Q107, and there's this desk right at the elevator, and she said, oh, you're here. And yeah, we'd like to meet. It was, I think, Rick Derringer actually was on the air. I'm not 100% sure. And why don't you go into the sound booth? And so we went into the sound booth with our toques on, our work boots, our jeans, everything, right? And the guy was on there. The sound booth had these yellow and orange lights, and an on-air sign like these have, and a guy sitting there chain smoking, spinning records. And he just moved the mic over and he said, well, look who's dropped in. It's Bob and Doug McKenzie. And I tried to say, no, it's Brian and Doug. There's our names, right? And he said, hey, I'm glad you've brought an album. Would you like to sign it for the folks? And so I signed it Bob and Doug, right? And I said, I can't give it to you, man. It's the only one I have. And it was only like a couple minutes. We were on the air and they thought we were Bob and Doug McKenzie. And he said, man, I've had phone calls. You guys were over at the Eden Center. And yeah, we were, man. We were shopping over at the record stores and stuff and looking for back bacon in the food court. And he said, all right, man. Thanks for dropping in, guys. And he started a record up and clicked off the mic. He said, thanks for coming in, guys. He goes, I know you're not really the McKenzies, but this was perfect. It's like, oh, great. So we went back to the mall to find our parents. And my mom was in the food court having a coffee. And, Mom, how's it going? She goes, oh, listen to the radio. They had the radio on. Bob and Doug McKenzie were over at Q107. And we were just laughing our heads off. Anyway, that's why I do this hoser thing, like in my winter coat and with my toque. I'm in my garage, and it's about 35 degrees in here. It's not very warm, but things like these old radios, I don't want to open them up in the house because they're just full of dust and sometimes asbestos and dead bugs. I picked this one up. So I'm going to do this one. I have a friend that's really interested in having this one restored, although it's my radio. I picked it up from an antique flea market type place. It's a 6-tube AM radio, Strongbow Carlson, and it's the Canadian one, made in Toronto. And it has probably the thickest Bakelite case you've ever seen on a radio of this vintage. And it's actually maybe kind of dusty and everything, but it's actually in very nice shape. Many of these get cracks from these screw holes. There's no screws. Some of these never had screws in the bottom. I've noticed that. They just use the screws on the back. Anyway, this is a radio from 1947. So there's the cord. I don't know if I should be plugging this in. So why do things like this in the garage? So let's see, is there anything? This is very dry. Well, if I plug it in the power bar, I think we should be alright. It would just blow the breaker anyway, right? So, let me get some gloves to insulate me. Yeah. So, please don't be offended if I open up a video and say, hey hosers. In that era in Canada, that was actually a mark of distinction. Being called a hoser. And then you're just like one of the boys. Well, no sparks or anything. Let's flip it on. Oh, it is on. Okay. Tuner string's broken. Glass is gone. It's plastic. There's no dial light in it. Yeah, that's the on. This is the tone right here. I bought this one first of all because it was $20. Exactly. Oh, there's something happening. Obviously bad filter capacitors. That's as far as we're going with this baby. So, if you're interested, let's have a little peek in it. Look at these beautiful knobs. Let's give them a little help getting them off. They're actually Bakelite knobs. Here, let's get some. I want to be careful I don't break these. Just gently, 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 gently. There was a piece of felt behind it. Okay, so there's the front. When I was in the telephone company, the telephone company had been buying up some old exchanges in northern Ontario, and they were Stronger Carlson step-by-step offices. And they were better built than the Northern Telecom ones, in my opinion. They were put in, like, they're the just pre-war from the late 30s, when they were just getting into automated telephone exchanges. Yeah. It's got a slot screw out here. I want to take a peek what's in here. Let's just see how original it is. There's the original mouse nest, too. I actually bought this. My cousin is in the antique business. He was kind of clearing out his radios because, to be honest, there was a time you could get fairly good money for these. I remember selling one of these restored for $300 US about 10 years ago, 10 to 12 years ago. Now, one day I was at a flea market, the big one in Guelph, and walking around, I saw 4 of them. They're all around $50. Okay, here we go. Oh, it's dusty. This is the kind of actually like we're getting where it comes out kind of like on a tray. You know, the Scotch tape stopped holding. Let's take a look at it. Ooh. It has a replacement filter cap. Speaker is in really nice shape. That's a bonus. The dial string has snapped off. And the tubes are GE, 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 RCA, GE, Sylvania. So, yeah. Just so you can see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the garage door and blow some of the dust out of it. Let me just tip it back. Let's see what it's like underneath. Okay, I zoomed the camera in a bit so you can see the chassis. Audio output transformer underneath. A B- rail actually made out of steel wire, which is kind of neat. But all of these original airboxes, there's no way this radio could still play anything beyond hum. This one is actually going to be fun to do. I just like the Flintstone size parts that are in it. It's kind of neat. blow all the dust out of it, take the tubes out, test them, clean them. This broad cap, yeah, that looks like a 1960s replacement. Yeah, pretty cool. And I know somebody asked me if I can do the Bob and Doug McKenzie call. I'll try. I've had a cold, but okay, that's it. That's the last time the Mackenzies are going to appear in one of my videos. But I like working on these Canadian pieces, and what's interesting is I actually had a few of these about 20 years ago. I had several of the American-built ones, several of the Canadian-built Strombergs, and there actually were quite a few differences in them. The chassis and everything was the same, but the parts, they had some, we'll talk about that when I get into restoring it, but that was very common back in those days. General Electric might make them for one part of the country, Rogers might make them for another. And here's the interesting thing. These were made in Toronto. There's a whole bunch on Lakeshore Boulevard. In the old days, there were manufacturing plants for Rogers, for GE, RCA. And these factories that built these are actually very small compared to today's factories. And it's just amazing how much they could produce. Anyway, oh, look at that. The dial string, part of it. Maybe a mouse ate it, I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching and listening, you hosers.